Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is Friday, August 21st, 2026. This is the last planned live stream until I make more changes that will happen until Wednesday, at which point that live stream is going to be pre-recorded. Perhaps not with as much changes as I will eventually get ambitious to do, but yeah, the plan is to at the very least try it once to have one weekly news live stream instead of having one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We may find we need to add one on Saturday just to keep things reasonable in length. We'll do a little bit of warm up and then we'll jump into the video game news, starting looking at the 24-hour peak concurrent chart of SteamDB. I'm still debating, and I imagine I may just do it by the seat of my pants, whether I'm going to do any warm-up at all on Wednesday, or if it isn't just going to immediately jump into the news. There is definitely a thought that the news may very well just jump between different news sources. And I probably should look and see if there's just like an extension that would sort tabs by their title alphabetically. I don't know if that would really help that much, because the titles themselves from different news sources would be different. So the first word is going to be different, so the alphabetizing that way doesn't make a lot of sense. The only thing that would off the top of my head make sense is if I just manually sorted them all, which is very possibly what's going to happen. And the temptation is going to certainly be to drop news stories that maybe aren't relevant a week later. I'm going to try to fight against that, but I may very well drop news stories that aren't really news in the first place. There is certainly something to be said there. And the plan, and I think I've gotten my programming set up to do it, is for the pre-recorded live stream on Wednesday to happen at 5 p.m. Central Time, United States Central Time, which we'll see what happens there. We'll see how long it is and how deep into the night that really goes. But yeah, I am gonna probably try to keep an eye on it, so I may very well be watching the chat at some level. If I did just sit and watch my own live stream after recording it earlier that day, that would mean a pretty long and arduous day for me every Wednesday. But if I did do that, then it would also mean I could fully focus my attention on the chat during the live streams, which is what premieres are supposed to be. I really am just keeping this as a live stream for kind of a legacy reasons. This is ironic. The Big Walk is almost off the top 100 chart now as a streamer bait fan friends slop type game. But I just watched a review of a movie based off of, I think, Stephen King's maybe very first short story novel, that The Long Walk, wasn't even published under his name Stephen King at the time. So we have two things with walk in the name. I guess that's not really that big of a coincidence, is it? So yeah, everything's still going to be in flux, and I may very well just undo everything. My macros are completely broken at this point, so once again today I've had to open all of the news stories myself. After Monday, it will be back on me to put a very high priority on getting new Violent Monkey scripts to replace my macros, my UI Vision macros, which are lack robustness, for lack of a better term. They're unstable. They break when the plugin breaks, and it really just should not work that way. It's been like that for probably years, and I just didn't have a better option until recently. I didn't investigate it enough to find a better option until recently. So what have I been doing for the past couple days? Still playing Memento Mori. On one of my accounts, I really wonder, but I really don't have any evidence, if I'm in a guild that literally is designed to just be cannon fodder, and that somebody is just using their alt account, which I'm not sure in Memento Mori if you're allowed to have alt accounts on the same server. You can have different server profiles, but they're all on the same account. But yeah, the two servers I'm on are pretty old, and there aren't a lot of new players, and it does lean to the one guild just controlling everything and being the most powerful, the most powerful guild, controlling everything and getting all the rewards. Which, yeah, that is a problem with the guilds they put into these kinds of mobile games, is that if you don't have a really good balancing system there, you're going to just have like the top 1 to maybe the top 10 guilds take all the rewards, and then you're going to have hundreds and thousands of people in guilds that can't get any reward at all. And yeah, you need the reward if you're going to be a free-to-play player to increase your power. And unfortunately, that is very much the rich get richer. I want to see this game type scenario. So yeah, I don't know. I'm probably just dissatisfied that the guild I'm happen to be in isn't the strongest guild. If I was in the strongest guild, then I would be not complaining at all, certainly, because it would be benefiting me. And in on the other server, I am in the strongest guild, so I have no idea what it would look like if those two servers ever merged, as far as which guild would I stay in automatically, or do I have to pick something, or which account I even get to keep, and whether I just lose all the resources of the other accounts. I would really hate for that to be the case, and I doubt it's the case, but I don't know how that really would merge together. I'm not sure even Memento Mori really has a solution there. Otherwise, I'm still trying to get the solo challenges done for Pokemon TCG Pocket. Just trying to get as much rewards as possible and build up what should be a good stockpile of the currencies, the multiple currencies in Pokemon TCG Pocket, for the next time that the thing next time there's the special card packs are available to get. And they've announced the next expansion on Pokemon TCG Pocket. Interesting. The gateway, getting a gateway timeout error on Moby games. ATI Technologies, established 41 years ago, pretty defunct now. It was, I think, acquired by AMD, and the branding ATI hasn't been used in I think, a very long time. I don't think people have enough nostalgia around it. There was definitely a computer I built with an ATI graphics card, and maybe I was being stupid and could have gotten an NVIDIA back at the same time, but I don't know if NVIDIAs were really available at the time either. But soon after that point, it definitely was the case that NVIDIA dominated for gaming for decades. And you would be foolish to buy anything other than an NVIDIA for Windows gaming, and you'd be foolish to try to do any kind of gaming that wasn't on Windows. I'm into the first couple episodes of season 3 of Tales from the Crypt. That second season in particular really highlights a Looney Tunes-ness to the whole thing, which, in fairness, all these stories are based on those comics. Tales from the Crypt was one of the series, but the publisher had several different series that were these kinds of horror moralistic plays where usually there's a bad guy that does a murder, and then the bad guy gets murdered himself at the end, and that is just what happens in the story, is that they get a Comics Code Authority approved turnabout so that the bad guy doesn't win, compared to the gangster comics before, in the previous generation of comics, where the gangsters were accused of being glorified. But yeah, they pretty much, I think, are just doing maybe even shot for shot comic panel to TV translations. Kind of would explain some of the nudity in it, other than it just being HBO and producers every now and then coming in and saying, hey, can you get this celebrity who is somewhat famous to take their top off for half of a second. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe in the comics there is some of that was shown too. Although I'm not 100% sure if that's the case, that the Tales from the Crypt comics were full-on adult comics with nudity in them. That more than likely is an HBO thing. Speaking of celebrities, that is one of the nicer things about watching Tales from the Crypt. Although the stories are pretty bad, and sometimes I am just muting it and not paying attention to it. But it is nice to see some actors who, if aren't dead by now, are close to being dead. And we are, yeah, most of the actors I would have seen in my heyday of watching TV in movies would have potentially shown up in one episode of Tales from the Crypt. For instance, the actor who played Marty McFly in Back to the Future shows up as a lawyer for one scene in one of the episodes. And that's really how a lot of it happens, is that they are just getting these cameo characters to show up, or they sometimes have the actors play the main character too. So it is a little Looney Toony, but also adult and very nostalgic. So it's a fun enough experience watching it on Tubi TV, Tales from the Crypt. I don't think I'm gonna get too much out of it though, and potentially I've seen way more of the episodes than I thought I did, which I'm a little surprised if that is the case, because I just have no idea how I would have been able to watch Tales from the Crypt. I know for a fact I never had HBO. HBO maybe gave a free preview every 4 or 5 years on basic cable, but I'm not sure it even did that much. So how would I have seen it? Would be, and yeah, there's really just, unless it was on Netflix at some point and I watched it on Netflix, that would be the only thing that would even make any sense to me. Well, I guess I could have watched it on Prime Video and blacked out the whole experience. It may very well be, though, that the stories are just fairly so similar that one episode feels like all the other episodes. It does feel like somewhere at the end of the second season, maybe the beginning of the third season, they may have gone to a different kind of filming. I wouldn't say it went from like 35mm, or let's face it, probably 8mm, or something in between filming to digital. But I wouldn't be surprised if they went from the first season being filmed more like a movie on 35mm, and then the second season at some point moved to filming on Betamax. Still film, but potentially digital to film. I think that was Betamax. Or even, 8mm actually is too small for anybody to realistically have done for a TV show. But you could potentially have some range between 8 and 35mm as far as the size of the film. Like 12mm. I don't know if that was even a standard or not. But it does feel pretty worse looking. And yeah, there definitely are shows like that where the transition to the, finally it loads, the transition to the to digital was pretty bad. At least when you have something like the animated reboot CGI that is creating something wholly brand new, so you could say, well, this looks awful because there's nothing really to compare it to, or in the retrospect it looks awful. But honestly, reboot was kind of amazing when it first came out because there was nothing to compare it to. Of course, that didn't help the next show that the creators of Reboot worked on, Beast Wars, at which people were able to very much compare the original Transformers hand-drawn animation show to the very limited CGI that Beast Wars had. But Beast Wars did win over an audience pretty well. So I've never seen this Adventures of Captain Becky, but it certainly screams that Xbox feel of the era. Looks like it was a platformer, scored 2.8 out of 5 based on 1 rating. So this must have been really unknown. If anything, that really shows just the level of how the indie spirit started to take over on Xbox 360 and how indies were finally being let into the party for console games. This Psychotoxic is another example, certainly. Always put a bikini babe or a good looking girl on the cover. What is this one? Is this one got a rating? 2.5 stars out of 5. Infirmature. Definitely another game I don't recognize. First person shooter. There definitely was a ton of those that happened. What's with the zoom being different now? Why is it clipping off? I don't know. But yeah, I don't know if I'm really watching too much of anything else. It is just kind of Tales from the Crypt. Still trying to take it very easy and relax until my very important Zoom call on Monday, which, depending on the outcome of that call, could definitely make major changes to my plans, so I'll just have to wait and see. But if everything goes fairly well, or even really well, it might be a lot of stress off my shoulders, and then I can get back to trying to do some more physical stuff. Maybe physically exhaust myself a little bit more as I try to move forward. There was a slick deals for the extended edition Blu-rays of Lord of the Rings trilogy. Not the 4K version, which doesn't have all the same features, as far as I can tell. So basically you want, and I am definitely not a Lord of the Rings fan big enough to justify owning both the 4K versions and the Blu-rays. And I hope it isn't the case that I find that there are a lot of 4K videos that dropped a lot of the extra stuff. Although it probably doesn't matter for a lot of shows, it's kind of sucks to have to double up your collection just to maintain some of the extras. I know some of the old animes had that problem too, where particularly the Japanese companies would just completely lose or not relicense the extras for shows, and then they would just give bare bones versions of the basic show to American publishers, in part because they were pissed that the American price that had to be set for the American version was just so much lower than the Japanese price, which was overpriced and marked up through the roof. There was definitely a lot of fear and talk of reverse importation happening in Japan, where even the Japanese anime fans would import an English release from usually America, but around the world, any English release will do, and pay a third of the price, even with having it have to be shipped back to Japan. I am still playing Artisan of Glimmet. Man, it is really just grinding me quite a lot. There is a ton of puzzles there. I am starting to fear that it may be a 60-hour game. I started being afraid that it would only be like a 5 or 10 hour game, and that would have been too short. Now I'm 30 hours in, and I'm ready for it to pretty much wrap up. I just don't think the puzzles are particularly that intriguing or worth spending that much time on. I basically have probably gone through over 300 puzzles, and maybe 2 of them were slightly fun, slightly remarkable and memorable, and then the vast majority of them are very much homework, just busy work type puzzles. And very often I've heard myself say that the solutions are just not satisfactory. I'll accidentally fiddle my way into a solution more often than logically solve any of the puzzles, if there is logical ways to solve the puzzles, I have failed completely to extract that information without just fiddling. Which, yeah, that does feel like I'm just brute forcing solutions, and that's not very satisfactory. And even if in brute forcing solutions of puzzles, you ideally would want to be able to walk away from the puzzle and have learned something new that you could take on to the next puzzle, and I'm not really seeing any real examples of that either. I'm using a ton of hints, and it really comes down to just how much have I slept since I last recorded an episode. Because, yeah, the puzzles that claim to be like low difficulty are just about the same difficulty. Something is going on weird here. It's jumping over a tab. I know I changed a bunch of the extension settings, but I don't think it should work that way. But yeah, a 2-star difficulty puzzle can be as difficult to me, depending on how much I've slept, as a 7-star difficulty puzzle. You can see here I have 30 out of 57 achievements, which does really imply I might only be about halfway through the game. I don't think that really is the case, and I'm assuming you're going to get like 3 to 6 at minimum achievements once you get to the end for just solving most of the puzzles of a certain level of difficulty. And it says I've been playing for 140.9 hours, and I haven't been playing that long, but boy does it kind of feel like it. I don't get, every time I'm closing a tab, it is jumping over the tab to the right to the next tab to the right. But yeah, that's what I've mostly been doing, other than basic home stuff, which basic maintaining your life home stuff is always something that takes up a lot of energy and time too. Laundry, doing dishes, taking the trash out, all things that for normal healthy people should be something you could do in a matter of a couple of minutes, and for me becomes 20 to 30 to 40 minute long efforts, on top of the fact that very often I need to just time it right and build up energy before even starting. Is there any other warm-up stuff to do? Well, one of the things I was thinking about while playing the Artisan in Plymouth is it is, I guess, I think I would like a puzzle game that's in a 3D environment that has like one giant puzzle for each area, if not for the entire game, and you were doing just like smaller puzzles to get pieces to the bigger puzzles. Almost like if you were doing a jigsaw puzzle that was maybe 10 pieces by 10 pieces, and then that jigsaw puzzle connects to a much larger jigsaw puzzle, and so that 10 by 10 becomes a single piece for a bigger puzzle. And obviously you'd probably do that more figuratively than literally. Maybe there's a slight problem with designing puzzle games like that, but maybe you could do it that way. There are actually a couple of puzzles like that. One of the technologies they call is the Infinity Connect technology, where you solve like a 500 to 1,000 piece puzzle, and then you take the border pieces off and you connect one puzzle to the next 500 to 1,000 piece puzzle of a collection of multiple puzzles. Inevitably, the most recognizable version of those giant puzzles are Disney puzzles with little different pictures of Disney characters that all connect into one big, like, montage gallery picture. And there's a puzzler on YouTube that's doing an older version of that where they probably messed up and they had far too many background pieces in the older version of the Disney puzzle, and it just left it what was, you start with a 9,000 piece puzzle, and if you do all the picture parts of that and ignore the background, you still probably have 2,000 pieces that all look exactly the same. The newer versions fix that by just having, like, Mickey jump out of the picture frame, be right and next to the next picture frame, and just eliminate any spacing you'd really have between one picture frame and the next. Which, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there actually is a fairly large amount of older puzzles that the puzzle people are probably never going to really admit were badly designed, but are pretty notoriously known for being more difficult than your average puzzler really would want. Even someone who makes a profession of puzzling probably doesn't want to struggle through a bad puzzle that takes forever. It can be a matter of self-pride, but most people aren't going to really recognize or care if you solved a really old puzzle, particularly since old puzzles basically have to be traded or found. You can't just buy them again. They don't do reprints on puzzles too often. So just looking at some of these games. Dungeon Tells. Well, that looks interesting. Put that on the follow list. Then Dear Van Gogh is in early access, but it's rated very positively. Doesn't look like we've got any more refurbs. No real surprise there. It is still very questionable when we get to Wednesday's weekly stream whether it's worth talking about some of this stuff. It might very well make a lot of sense to not talk about refurbs, because if I see a refurb is available, the odds of it being available even a few hours later is just far too low, let alone a few days later. But if I go to the front page of Steam and see that there's a week-long festival going on, that is, I think, newsworthy. Yeah. Some of this stuff is not kicking in as far as the CSS, so I need to work on that. The top bar has changed how it works. Oh yeah, I talked about saying I got the Lord of the Rings things. Apparently it was delivered, but I think it's in my mailbox, and honestly I just can't be bothered to go check my mailbox. Supposedly there was another thing that was supposedly shipped by mail, so I guess if it went missing, That would tell me that somebody's potentially stealing stuff out of my mailbox. But I bet that's not the case. I also wouldn't be surprised if I went outside and found that it actually isn't in the mailbox, it's just around the corner somewhere. Walmart delivery does not take pictures. At least they didn't this time. Which it's very helpful for the delivery people to take pictures to A, prove that they actually delivered something, and B, tell me where the heck they hid it. Because, you know, there's plenty of places things could be hidden. I haven't really given much more thought to the idea of using AI to make a program that wouldn't get made any other way. The thought still is there. I made a suggestion a couple of years ago for a program that I knew I was never going to have time to make. I actually really have a lot of backburnered projects that very possibly will not get finished before I die of old age, and I would like to rather see them finished. Sure, I'd love to be able to afford to pay a programmer, or even know a programmer who is good enough and reliable enough to actually finish the projects for me, but that such a thing is unlikely to happen too. So that is still in the back of my mind, but even the idea of using AI on a backburnered project is backburnered. So yeah, the list of things that go unfinished goes on forever. It's not inherently bad in life to have things that you don't finish. I think a lot of people emphasize finishing everything and showing determination far too much, when a lot of times it's not worth it, and it's just not logical to spend that much time. Sure, you tell kids to stick to it and finish things, but schools basically tell that to kids so that they stick to jobs forever and don't quit. One of my best decisions in my working career was almost certainly to quit my technically second, but mostly it was my first job in less than 6 months, because I could, from an outsider, really evaluate how terrible of a situation it was going to be and how nothing was ever going to change. And to note that in quitting that job, that kept me open and available and to get a much better job, or no, it was a much worse job in the long run, but it paid a lot more. And I worked at that much worse job for 5 years and made much more money. And then I got called by that same first job, and they tried to hire me back at the exact same pay scale 5 years later. Like, no increase to minimum wage or anything like that. It basically was a minimum wage job at the time, and yeah, no consideration that I'd been working somewhere else for 5 years straight and had a lot more work experience and had admittedly probably matured a little bit even. Yeah, so that definitely proved to me nothing was ever going to change at that job. And school would have told me that you can't quit, you've got to stick to it, you've got to just keep on doing things. And nah, it's not true. It's not true when you're working for other people. It's not true for working for yourself. Don't give up on yourself, but sure, give up on ideas and projects. Back burner them, come back to them if you have better ideas and ways of improving it. A lot of the projects I've thought of certainly also improve significantly with time and better options. AI might just be one of those options, certainly. Solar panels nowadays are kind of a great example, as plug-in solar with no back feeds are apparently now becoming an option where you just put a clamp meter on your main power coming in circuit breaker, and it just senses how much power you are using and makes the solar panels only produce or release that much power, and burns off the rest, I imagine, as heat, or shuts down maybe some circuits completely. I'm not sure exactly how it does it. I'd assume it burns it off as heat. But yeah, paying potentially just $2,000 or $3,000 for a kit like that to counter when your refrigerator is running and not having to have a contract with the power company and not having to have a contract with a solar company is a very attractive offering these days. You still probably would want to know what you're doing and be careful as far as hooking up the clamp meters inside of an electrical panel. And a lot of the kits, because they are plug-in solar, really want it to be in a dedicated circuit, which means you potentially lose an outlet, and probably only are going to go up to 8 to 1200 watts. And I don't think any of it can be like 3-phase. So there definitely is a step with plug-in solar to take it to the next step where you might need 2 kits working in conjunction on 2 separate circuits on 2 separate phases to try and balance out the load that an air conditioner is pulling and an air conditioner condenser is pulling. And your air conditioner is really going to be your major thing depending on your house. You may also have like a 1500 watt water heater, electric water heater, that is pulling a lot of electricity too. And microwaves are high wattages, but they're not used that much. Space heaters use a ton of electricity too. But yeah, until you can really get the air conditioner HVAC system on a plug-in solar, that's where you would see a major amount of savings. Otherwise, you potentially are going to be producing a lot of power on the circuit that isn't plugged into your HVAC and putting it into a battery for everything else, which still might work if half of your electricity is your air conditioner and half of your electricity is 3 refrigerators and running space heaters and just several computers. That might work for you too. But yeah, that is a side ramble certainly on the fact that the technology just does seem like it's getting better pretty quickly here. Although in the United States they may be very slow to really authorize plug-in solar. Like, it might be technically legal on a federal level or state level in certain cities, may just be incredibly slow and frankly bribed to not allow it within certain city limits. But then with plug-in solar, the thing is you could probably get away with it and not be caught. But yeah, there's just like constant monitoring going on with the power companies, so I don't know how much authority they really have to disconnect people or change the plans on people. Theoretically, these plug-in solars, if you could get a plan that was free nights and weekends, could bring your bill down to approaching zero, probably closer to $50 a month. at minimum. But yeah, if they're not charging you anything when the sun is down, and then you're severely reducing what you're using when the sun is up, that can work fairly well. Although most of the nights and weekends plans are also combined with very high rates for what you do use, so the second there's even a small slip up, you end up paying through the nose. And the traditional thought of a nights and weekends planned and then sneaking a bunch of batteries in really starts to raise the price quite a bit. Yeah. The idea of a do-it-yourself plug-in solar with no batteries to start for just $2,000 or $3,000 is becoming more attractive. And then you buy batteries later, then you probably have to just constantly upgrade things and try and figure out how it works. There probably aren't enough options in different devices yet to really pull it off, but they are coming as power demand just keeps going higher and higher. Anyways, I'm really rambling here. Let's actually go through the video game news, otherwise this is just going to be a ridiculously long stream, and I still am very much in that danger zone that I'm just going to get tired and fall asleep in the middle of the stream if I'm not careful. So we'll go through the Video Games Chronicle articles. Again, if I mix all of the articles up, these interstitials that I've made would basically have to go away. A new 15-minute trailer of Black Myth Zhongquai shows the game's combat in action. Man, the hyper-realistic graphics of some games these days is getting really crazy, because to my eyes, that looks like live action. Yeah. It's getting harder and harder to tell. But is that good? Let's just take a moment and ask that question. Is this an interesting video game frame? I would say not really. You've got a severe lack of dynamic range of colors of grass. You have browns and dark greens of grass in the background. You have a whitish foggy sky, no significant amount of blue to be seen at all. The sword here is dark and dirty. You get a little bit of a shade of green here on that. None of this metal work is shiny. The clothing here is torn, dingy, and boring gray. Got a little green on the sash, a little bit of maybe blue and brown. So all of this feels very realistic, but it's just not pretty, for lack of a better term. And sure, I'm an anime fan, so I love bright, colorful images very often, but even when it is going for more of a realistic appearance, I would rather it feel more cartoony, more video gamey. Yeah, the most central spot here is some major wound on his head and scars on the nose. This definitely is a frame that says this guy's been beat up. And yeah, that's not really what I would want to see. Let's jump into the middle of the game and see what it actually looks like in gameplay versus that frame, which was probably from a cutscene. In the actual gameplay, you're much more zoomed out, and the level of detail definitely feels like it is less. The color palette is still pretty much the same, but you are getting a lot of white sections of rocks, which are I think subtly supposed to be highlighting where you can climb. And then there's a whole bunch of flies that look like they're pointing you in a direction, so it seems like it may have been a chase sequence telling you to go in that way. The water looks a little bit more interesting for a second there. And then now we're seeing what looks like a cutscene of swimming. Yeah, I just don't know if... well, those weren't flies, those were magic talisman paper things. And so he's saving a drowned lady corpse. Well, I'd say that single frame does feel like it is pretty accurate to the rest of the game. But yeah. It may just not be for me because the rest of the game does look fairly ugly. That was quite a long cutscene to then load in a monster, which ironically I think they probably have this set up so that he's going to defeat the monster in shorter time than you probably actually can in the game. When you see characters just swinging around their swords, like crazy, it's hard to tell whether there's an actual combo system or whether it is just really just button mashing. Because yeah, there's a pretty big difference between a lot of games that just let you button mash to win and fighting games that have enemies that really are going to require you to parry and know what you're doing. The more Dark Souls type things. Which I guess in part that's probably why there was such a fandom and resurgence for super hard Dark Souls type games, is that the game industry before Demon Souls was probably leaning more and more into the more casual button mashing experience. Of course, a lot of these games have just like difficulty settings, and so it may very well be the case that you can still button mash on easy. But yeah, this definitely looks like a Demon Souls type experience. And this game and this fight has just like several phases, it looks like, to it. Of course, at this point I'm not sure I want to watch more of this. See how much further. And it's still a couple more minutes before he does the final blow. And then I think you get back into cutscenes. This is another, I think, great example too of the lies and manipulations that advertisements are. And there is a question about whether there ever is such thing as an honest advertisement, but yeah, they are calling this a 15-minute gameplay trailer when fairly obviously there's significant parts of this that are not showing gameplay and are instead showing cutscenes. Just that the game transitions from cutscenes to the next thing very quickly. I guess we'll just keep going forward and then we'll work our way back with the news stories. It doesn't really make any sense to click on one, then go back and click on another. So, nearly 20 minutes of the new Silent Hill Townfall gameplay shows puzzle solving and the first monster encounter. Do we want to really watch this? Honestly, I just don't feel like there's really a reason to pay any attention to Silent Hill Townfall until it comes out and has some real reviews around it. While there was a potential interesting twist with Silent Hill F in that it was a Japanese team making a Silent Hill game, that led to a pretty disappointing product that honestly did not feel like a Silent Hill game at all. This game too is questionable as far as, is it going to feel like Silent Hill to Silent Hill fans? This whole puzzle solving section definitely has what would you do if you were trying to make PT but had to make it an actual complete game vibes to it, which is to just make it an adventure game. But yeah, with the settings being just completely different for Silent Hill F and Silent Hill Townfall, it just feels like this is Konami licensing the Silent Hill name out to anybody and not particularly caring about it, which is exactly what Konami is doing. I think it's pretty obvious. And maybe Konami will do that for many Silent Hill games until it gets so dire that they get desperate enough to remake Silent Hill 3 or remake Silent Hill 1. Which I think the move is almost certainly to remake Silent Hill 1. Then probably remake Silent Hill 3. But there is definitely also a thought about taking the story in a different direction and soft rebooting it and making something called Silent Hill 3 that is just not going to be connected to the original Silent Hill 3 game. It almost feels like, boy, does that map feel kind of small. Like Silent Hill F and Silent Hill Townfall are actively being set up to fail so that they can try and convince people to say, hey, you don't want a reboot of Silent Hill, or you don't want a new sequel Silent Hill game, you only want remakes. Which maybe is true and maybe isn't. You can see this guy has a IV in his hand, which maybe means he has a bad veins, because they typically don't go through the hand. At first they go through the arm. Usually your veins are pretty thin on the back of the hand, but then again they probably just wanted you to see the IV. And we just saw him cut some kind of skin thing to open the door with a scalpel. So I mean, you really only have to see that much to assume he's in a hospital or he woke up in a hospital and that this story very possibly is just happening in his mind. Interesting. The TV. It lets you spy on these monsters. I guess you're in a different world now. And you've got your very basic, we're hiding a load screen. Like crawling through a section. Yeah. This is showing me something new. I fully admit that. But yeah. The problem here is in the name. And maybe I'm just old and stuck in my old ways, but I just don't think any new game should be called Silent Hill unless it is extremely a sequel to the Silent Hills that have existed in the past. And in that, I feel like you also probably need to try and combine and clean up what the canon and narrative of Silent Hill is anyways. This guy's gonna rip his chest open. Let's not show that just for YouTube family friendliness reasons. So yeah, that showed me a little bit of stuff, but I still am not super hot on the idea of Silent Hill Townfall. And I feel like before Silent Hill Townfall even gets released, Konami is going to show off some footage for some new Silent Hill game and try to get you hyped on the next thing before the current thing is even out. Let's see, the 90s puzzle Panic Bomber W joins the Super Bomberman collection for free, marking its first Western release. It's a Super Famicom game that was added to the completion in the free update. Okay. Yeah. Came out in 1995, which for that level of graphics I wouldn't have been surprised if that was closer to 1990. But whatever. That's kind of the problem with Bomberman as a character, is that it is what it is. Bomberman games are this very weird, unique style of games, and they have some variants, but I don't think any of them have been super popular. I believe they are doing something more with the Super Bomber Girl arcade game that came out a few years ago, which took Bomberman and turned them into lewd anime girls. Which, I mean, what else can you really do with Bomberman other than completely change it? You either respect it and make no new games and don't make any changes, which a company like, I believe Konami wouldn't really do, or you just use the name as much as possible, which is what I imagine they will do. Let's see. As Switch 2 prices are set to increase next month, Nintendo has confirmed the new UK price. The console is going to cost £24 more than it currently does starting September 1st. Remember, Video Games Chronicle is a UK based news source. But yeah, things are going up. And while it probably isn't going to affect video games exclusively, I did see an interesting YouTube video, which may very well be explaining the situation, that really seems like there may be even more desire amongst the European Union countries to completely disconnect and not do business with United States companies because United States companies cannot provide what was called safe harbor in the past, and has had several other names, as far as the privacy of European Union citizens in the United States, in part because the United States government, CIA, FBI, is just spying on everybody and can compel secretly any US company to give any data they want to them at any time. And there is just not even an independent oversight committee or person that is putting any kind of oversight to spy organizations like the CIA and FBI, because the Trump administration just won a ruling with the Supreme Court to say they could fire that person. So there was someone who was in what was supposed to be an independent role, and they got fired for one reason or other, who knows, and they challenged it in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said no, you can be fired, so you really weren't that independent, which that was one of the requirements the European Union was requiring, is that there would be an independent board to overlook those spy agencies. So it's very possible that there will be a court filing in the European courts, European Union courts, which will potentially have a ruling that says just everybody, every company in the European Union can't do business with the United States, which that sounds like a big ruling if it does happen. But yeah, we have seen that the European Union and other countries around the world definitely just increasingly want to be more independent and not use American company software and American company services. And yeah, there is just going to increasingly become that case. Linux is becoming particularly more popular amongst government agencies in the European Union, just because they don't want to do business with Microsoft or Google or Apple. Of course, again, that's not directly the video games, but it could certainly affect video game companies too. Let's see. Brick Shop, Mattel's Lego equivalent. Now, I think Lego fans may argue there is no such thing as a Lego equivalent, and that the brick toys that aren't Lego tend to be particularly inferior. And certainly a lot of them are pretty bad as far as the Chinese knockoff Lego things. But at a certain point, I think also people might make the argument that they are just supposed to be toys and they're supposed to be relatively cheap, and as Lego's just gotten more and more expensive, it's not really worth it to be paying 15 cents, 20 cents a brick for a piece of plastic, or even 10 cents a brick per a piece of plastic, particularly since even some of the Lego pieces have had manufacturing problems and caused issues, brittle brown being a big factor there, as far as brown pieces that broke years, even months after you caught them. But yeah, let's read the headline. Brick Shop, Mattel's Lego equivalent, is launching a 3,509 piece recreation of the original Xbox. It is a $330 set, so it's not really cheap compared to Lego, and it includes a 1-to-1 scale console, Duke controller, lights, and music. That being said, I mean, if it's including lights and music, $330 might be in line with what a Lego version of this would be. I don't think Lego would want to do business with Microsoft. because one, Microsoft doesn't really have a lot of kid-friendly franchises that they want to actually promote. They could certainly have had like Banjo-Kazooie and Rare characters, but that would be about it. And two, I just don't think they would want to piss off Nintendo when they are only a few years into having agreements with Nintendo in the first place. Maybe it's been 5 or 6 years now, but before then Nintendo was not doing business with them, and they probably have gotten a massive amount of sales for the Nintendo Lego sets that they've made, and they still would like to convince the Pokemon Company, which Nintendo owns a major share of, to also have an agreement with them so that we would see even more Pokemon sets from Lego. But yeah, we are seeing Pokemon sets from Lego too. Same would be true for Sony. I can't see Lego really doing anything with Sony for both the exact same reasons. Sony doesn't really have a lot of kids games it wants to promote, and they don't want to piss off Nintendo. Is this a decent Lego equivalent set? It's fine, and it's probably going to be the only way you could get an Xbox if you just want a Lego set for every like console that exists. Lego has the Game Boy set. Lego had, it'd be hard to find now, the NES set. They've got a Donkey Kong arcade set. Right now, they had a Pac-Man before. If you really wanted to try to get all the arcade things, they might do. They had an Atari set. So this would be your Xbox set, and I wouldn't be surprised if this company actually makes a PlayStation 1 set, or even a Sega Dreamcast set. The question then becomes, is that really what you want? Do you just want a bunch of shelves of non-functioning consoles when you could just as easily have a functioning Xbox One, or original Xbox, not an Xbox One, on your shelf, on display? Yeah. The danger really is getting to the point where Lego is trying to pretend like you're collecting things when you could just easily, for probably even less money, collect those things. And it would be better for society in the long run to have more people collect original Xbox on their shelf than Lego equivalent things. Seems like you get a little bit of, I wouldn't call them minifigs, a little bit of figurines to display Psychonauts and Halo 1. I did hear of another YouTuber reviewing their experience playing Halo Campaign Evolved, and yeah, they didn't particularly play the campaign of Halo. I guess this is supposed to be Morrowind. Were all those on the original Xbox? Not sure. But yeah, it wasn't particularly a great review as far as what the experience went like. And yeah, I would suspect that's probably most people's experience at the moment with Campaign Evolved. For the people that even stuck with it, is that they probably have no real nostalgia for playing the single player campaign, and really would want just multiplayer, not co-op, which I think Campaign Evolved has co-op but doesn't have multiplayer, which seems like the absolute opposite of what you would want to do. Alright, well, time to take a little bit of a break, so I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel has another one of their little animated episodes for what the first couple of those that I looked at were worth. They weren't worth much. They looked fancy, but they weren't a full episode telling a story or anything. And they were animations showing the characters depicted in the cards, not showing characters playing the card game. So no Yugi or Kaiba or anybody like that, as far as I could tell. It did get me thinking that I keep running into this issue with card games in particular, in that I feel like the only way Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel would have really made me happy is if they had added a Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush mode, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush had just become a thing in the West. And the only way Pokemon TCG Pocket, even worse for TCG Pocket, is going to survive and keep my attention is it's got to add the classic 6 points to win way of playing Pokemon. Whether they call that classic mode and they de-emphasize it a lot, fine, but the expansions and the power creep is just too high that you're running into this scenario where a single mega Pokemon put in play risks you losing just by accidentally killing that character. And they kind of know that because they program their solo challenges and their AI to do it. They play a character, I believe, named Cyrus, who brings an injured character from the backbench of the Pokemon, your backbench, into play, which means if you have a Mega Pokemon and it's about to die, the only thing you usually can do is retreat it back to the backbench. But then if they can just play Cyrus and bring it back and then kill it and then immediately win the game, there's no strategy against that. And that means very quickly, I think we're going to have a situation where either you just can't play Mega cards at all, as more and more expansions add Mega cards, or you only are playing Mega cards and just hoping they don't play Cyrus fast enough. But yeah, it definitely would make me a lot happier with Pokemon TCG Pocket if they just put in the traditional play style. Even if it was just for the solo challenges, that would work for me. But also for the player versus player challenges, if I was ever going to drop in there and play player versus player, that'd be nice too. They very much de-emphasize the need to play player versus player. Although I suppose if I stopped playing Memento Mori and didn't find something to replace it, I probably would play a lot more Pokemon TCG Pocket. Moving on, the next story here is the first trailer for Paramount Golden Axe cartoon. Contains magic, meta humor, and a release date. The show is co-created by the Star Trek Lower Decks creator Mike McMahon, I guess. That really means nothing, the subtitle here, as far as subheadline. Something being co-created by somebody who is credited as the creator of Star Trek Lower Decks means basically nothing, because that doesn't tell you that the whole team that made Lower Decks is involved, or even anyone else from the team. And usually creator credits are often given to just like the person who pitches the original pitch and the idea, not the people who polished that original idea into I think Lower Decks has 3 seasons at the moment, and then they've, I think, announced that they're going to make more seasons, which is kind of funny because they've already put out Blu-ray saying that was the complete series. Paramount, I think, pretty desperate. Probably the case when you're talking about Golden Axe. And I believe I saw, and I may be just totally wrong about this, that the Japanese audience, who maybe have a little bit more love for Golden Axe, or not super excited about this trailer. Either I wouldn't be surprised if there is thoughts that it's just using AI or being lazy. I think part of the problem with Golden Axe is it never really worked as a thing where you were supposed to have a big story around it, and it very much is an old school arcade game that was very much designed to steal quarters from kids. Yeah. Looking at this trailer, it does feel to me like this is just going to have a kind of Venture Brothers type feel to it. It would be perhaps a little lazy just to say everything feels like Rick and Morty, but yeah, it definitely feels like it's going to have a level of irrelevancy of, or not irrelevancy, what's the other word? Irreverency? Yeah, I don't know how you'd actually say that. Silliness. We'll just use smaller words. Yeah. Golden Axe may really be a fantasy game made by Japanese people for the Western world, or just a really early fantasy game. It definitely has more of that Dungeons and Dragons feel than what Japanese people would think of as far as fantasy these days. And yeah, you can't help but get a feeling that it's gonna feel potentially a lot like the He-Man reboots and reattempts, or the She-Ra reboot reattempts, which none of that I think was ever that popular. We may have hit a point where there's barely anything nostalgic left to try and reboot or do something new with, and we may be hitting a point where, out of sheer desperation, people are going to just have to try and create new things. And I suppose that there is a fear there that they're, out of sheer desperation, they're going to just let AI go wild and create something completely new, despite the fact that then it wouldn't be copyrightable. I wouldn't be surprised if there's already a lot of writers that are using AI and claiming it's their writing, though. Like, and in fairness, yeah, if I thought I could get away with it, I would just start using AI to write Stephen King-like novels and just churn them out as fast as Stephen King did when he was on cocaine and a heavy alcoholic. I'm pretty sure that's what he said he was both on. I'm sorry if I got one of those wrong. But yeah, so far AI writing is awful and really only does about 16 pages until you're burning through so many tokens and having to pay for it. But yeah, I don't think it is going to ever write full novels. But then Hollywood wouldn't probably have that problem and would pay to have AI write full news stories. Sadly, it is a case where I'm not sure that the writing in Hollywood for TV and movies is good enough to say that AI would be much worse. I think there may very well be too much cronyism, too much nepotism, and too much just central focus as far as the location. Like, you have to be in California, you have to be in Hollywood to pitch anything you've written. Therefore, anybody else around the world just can't, like, email an idea and pitch it, or have an agent email an idea, or have an agent at all. And so yeah, there's definitely a lot of ideas that are just not being heard. Moving on, a former Arcane lead says Xbox let them come in and finish Redfall's major update after being laid off. Quote, I don't know. I know we don't work here anymore, but can we please release this? They asked. So is that an update for Redfall that is coming out? Or is that something that has come out? No, the last update was May 30th, 2024. That shows either, take it one way, a lot of stupidity and misplaced loyalty to a project that you don't own and were laid off from, or a lot of artistic pride in what you create and pride in what you want associated with your names. Which, yeah, you could either take that as a good thing or a bad thing. I would argue it's probably a bad thing to go back crawling to Microsoft and say, can we put this out as an official patch, instead of saying, hey, we are the people who were laid off on this team and we've made this mod, install this mod to fix the game. It's Microsoft's fault that the game was in such a bad state, and we could have done a lot better had Microsoft not hamstrung us. Yeah, I think you definitely throw your former employer under the bus a little bit there and make a mod team, and then you name that mod team, and then you take that mod team to potentially start a new development company, and then you take the work that that mod highlights to then announce your next project. At the very least, you get people on an email list saying, hey, please sign up for this email if you're going to download this mod. Yeah, I don't think you should go back to Microsoft for that. And at the end of the day, this is not a really good example of it helping anybody, because Arcane was just in such a bad shape, and it was almost certainly guaranteed to fail from the beginning, because it was yet another uncreative live service attempt. Sure, it's vampires shooting other vampires, but yeah, at the core of it, it was just a live service attempt, which basically all live service attempts are starting to crumble and fall apart, and the idea that live services were going to be the future and the only type of games that big publishers make is falling apart, and thank goodness for that. Let's see. Moving on, Gamescom 2026, Jeff Keighley and organizers reveal what to expect from the game's biggest events. From gaming's biggest event. Is Gamescom really the biggest event, or is it the other two Jeff Keighley events? I would say it's the other two Jeff Keighley events. That's the Video Game Awards in winter and the Summer Game Fest, I believe it's called, in summer. My logic behind that is Gamescom would have not brought in Jeff Keighley as a presenter if it was the biggest event. They would have brought in somebody else, which there's plenty of European, German even, presenters that they could have brought in to be their new global face. There very possibly is like one like metric that Gamescom makes it the biggest event, but I'm not sure what it is, other than perhaps the other two events are closed door events, and this opening night live, which is hosted by Jeff Keighley, might be really open to a whole 350,000 general public things. People. Of course, if that's really the case, then opening night live is going to have some of the problems that other events have had, where the security was lackluster and people got up on stage and they really shouldn't have. This is interesting. They're going to have a live performance of the music from Eugenics. Which all of these events weirdly have live performances of music, and I don't think that translates to the live streams. And it still very much is the case that it's not worth your time to sit through any of the live streams at all. What gets shown are just a bunch of ads and trailers for games that are coming out 3, 4, 5 years at minimum from when they are announced, and everything is just going to be really slow. Meanwhile, people are getting rich once again to pay up to $520,000 to put a trailer up in opening night live. It is very much the case, I think, that part of the reason why we don't hear reviews of games and we don't hear about a lot of games is because even the big games are just putting way too much money into these one-time trailers, treating them like Super Bowl ads instead of having just more ads on like YouTube, or more sponsorships with even like big YouTube content creators to promote things and talk about them, or on Facebook or Google searches. I'd assume this guy is in cosplay and this guy is in cosplay for this picture. And that seems to be the only Gamescom picture they have for Video Games Chronicles, because I've used that picture before. Let's see. Next headline we have as a quote is, "We'd rather eat rocks and drink gasoline than be split up." Well, you don't have to do both to die. You could probably eat a small amount of smooth stone like aquarium rocks and be alright. I'm sure plenty of babies have done that. But yeah, I mean, even being around the fumes of gasoline is huffing gasoline, and you can easily die from the very first inhalation and huffing of gasoline. It's not a drug worth trying, and it really doesn't get you high as much as it just cuts off oxygen to your brain, much like the pass out game and choking games, which are also incredibly dangerous. But yeah, Compulsion Games has completed its buyout from Xbox. The South of Midnight studio now officially owns all of its IP. I think there is a chance that that is really good for them. The question is, what can they do with the IP they have now? Like, they have South of Midnight. Again, a game I don't feel like was advertised well at all, but also not a super long game, and not something I think they can just afford to add a whole new chapter to it or completely overhaul the gameplay system, or fix even the frame rates, which it had a pretty weird stop motion animation feel to the frame rates, which I think was intentional but probably wasn't what people really wanted. Meanwhile, if we ignore South of Midnight, you have the We Happy Few game, which they could make a sequel to that, but if they do, they're going to have to make it play much closer to some of the DLC that came out later, and nothing like the actual main game, because people really did not like that roguelite, or I think it may have been a roguelike gameplay experience that We Happy Few's main game was. And then you have Contrast, which is a short game, which maybe you could make a sequel to it. It's a platformer where you jump in the foreground, in the background, and the background is shadows to get to places. So yeah, you could make a small Contrast too. And for any company that just bought itself out, unless it's going to sell itself to somebody else or get a publisher to fund something huge, your assumption is that they would just try to make something like Contrast too. Although overall the pattern is to not make sequels and make something completely new, which one would assume if they made something completely new, the pattern here is some game with a unique visual style and platforming in it, and a strong narrative component. Maybe they could reduce the price on South of Midnight, and that might help too, as a game that maybe is selling for $30 instead of $60. They're saying now all sales of the games like South of Midnight will now directly support the studio. But yeah, post-launch sales of any game probably is not going to be enough to keep a studio running for that long. Let's see. I think we'd already been told this, so I don't know why this is a story again. Dave Bautista will now officially play Kratos in the God of War TV series, replacing the injured Ryan Hurst. Talks took place earlier this month and now have been reportedly concluded. I thought it was already a done deal. I don't know if that really matters too much. I don't know if a God of War TV show is going to be good or not. This is probably an example where you don't want to do the selfie camera thing. If you're a big muscly guy and you're trying to show off the muscles and the tattoo work, you probably want to look a little bit further down and not up your nose, and have somebody else probably take the pictures. Yeah, if this is what an early makeup test, I assume is what that is, looks like, that is much better than what we have here, which this really just felt like a fat Kratos character. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if a story comes out many years in the future and it turns out he didn't really hurt himself that bad, or he didn't hurt himself at all, and there was just a producer going, this guy looks too fat, let's bring in somebody who's going to starve themselves and work out non-stop to have 0% body fat on them. Let's see. I saw this announcement on Reddit. It seemed like there was a decent amount of audience that was upset about it. I never really know how many people care about fighting games. But the Riot fighting game 2XKO is officially ending development. 2XKO will end development at the end of this year. Refunds issued for purchases. There was, I think, also some tie-in with 2XKO to one of Riot's other games. From today, Riot will unlock all characters in the game, bundling most cosmetic items and refunding all money spent on 2xKO on or before August 20th. Any content owned is yours to keep. But if the servers are going down, I think that means you're just going to be able to local play. Yeah. Is this tied into League of Legends? That's my thought. But they're not saying that. Yeah. Fighting games still bemuse me. I just don't understand how many fighting games can succeed and if any of them are really that successful. It seems to me that every year at like EVO, a lot of the same fighting games get played. Not even new releases of the same fighting games, just the old versions of the same fighting games. Maybe with some updates happening here and there. Moving on from software response, as the Duskblood's first network test season was marred by failed to login errors. The Duskblood's network test was ended early after players received login errors. Which, yeah. Inherently, a proper test might end in failed to login errors, but you would assume and hope that a network test was robust enough that you could at least log in. But yeah, there's so many things that can go wrong as far as network code, particularly since a lot of network code is just about adding security to things. So yeah, kind of surprised that doesn't happen more for network tests. And certainly it's hard to make the argument that games don't need network tests and they should just be perfect before any players even see them, when obviously they do need network tests. The price and release date for the green X25 limited edition Xbox Series X and controller have been leaked. Is it supposed to be transparent? Are we actually seeing the insides of the Xbox in this picture? Or are we seeing a picture? I think it's actually transparent. I think you might actually be seeing the insides of it, which isn't particularly that impressive. Let's play the video and see if we can get a better visual angle. I would say it's pretty impossible to become or grow in nostalgia for the Xbox when there's just so much negativity that Microsoft is generating for itself. Like you can't do both at the same time, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. I saw a YouTube video, I don't know if I actually sat through it and watched it, but it was somebody trying to cool a CPU using a more passive chimney stack setup. And I wonder if there's a similar concept with the Xbox Series X as to why it is just that so ridiculously tall. Yeah. I don't know if that really makes sense, though. It may hint that both with the Steam Machine and the Series X, which are two devices developed years apart, it may very well hint, though, that there is just a growing strategy in how things are being developed to have one giant radiator cooler and then one giant fan to blow air on it, so that the devices are quieter. They are working on a chip technology, and it probably won't show up in consoles anytime soon, if ever, where chips would just be significantly wider, taking up potentially the entire disk of a silicon wafer. If that was the case, then it really at that point would make sense that consoles would just become really flat and very wide, like pizza boxes, not super tall or super small squares. But yeah, that technology is being designed right now for AI data centers. It's not being designed for consoles. But I do think we are seeing the inability to shrink the dies much more on CPUs, and so we probably will start to see a desire to have wider chips. But the problem with wider chips is that you usually need more voltage and more power going into the chip, so it's a very delicate balance as far as just how many watts can you cram into a chip as it gets bigger, and how can you have the chips dissipate heat as it gets denser. Yeah, we may very well hit a plateau point where can't really improve it CPU performance by much. It kind of doesn't matter if hard drives and RAM just stays ridiculously expensive. You could have a much faster CPU and it wouldn't really help much. Like, one of the code things I changed to reduce the CPU usage on the Steam pages that we're going to be looking at later was specifically to use the CPU a lot less, and basically it's not starting the code until the page is seen for the second time instead of for the first time. Is I'm thinking what I changed, although I'm not sure I can really trust my own coding that well. So yeah, we've talked about, I think in the last stream, that there was a whole bunch of leaks. I think the leaks may have tapered off, but there may still be some leaks that show up around GTA 6. Take-Two now has filed subpoenas asking Microsoft and Discord for records in the hunt for this GTA 6 leaker, which, from what I've heard, and just take this as rumor, it's a hacker group that got access to a runnable full build, it seems, via Rockstar India. So I don't know if Microsoft and Discord would even help them find a victim to try and sue. And the hacker group, while also promoting their meme coin, says they're doing this because they're not releasing GTA on physical discs. It also is interesting that I saw another Reddit post that basically was thanking the leaks for reminding them that GTA 6 is just another GTA game and not the second coming of Jesus. Yeah. And that may be the biggest impact that Take-Two didn't want to have happen, and the best impact for society overall is just to get people to take a step back and maybe not pre-order the $100 deluxe edition of GTA 6 or pre-order even the $80 base edition of GTA 6 and realize that it is just GTA with maybe a few bits of Red Dead Redemption added into it. But yeah, I definitely was speculating even before these leaks happened if we weren't going to find that there was a much smaller audience for GTA 6 than Take-Two wants, or people might think, as people have just potentially matured and will want different types of gameplay than GTA 6 is going to offer. Let's see, Marvel Token Fighting Souls sold fewer than 3,000 units in Japan in its first week. Retail sales for Marvel Token Fighting Souls are unexpectedly low in Japan. Well, I didn't know it was out in Japan. Again, a case of them just not really doing a great job of locking down and advertising the release date. And B, that is fairly low, but also, even though a lot of these characters are kind of designed to be a little bit more anime, they aren't anime enough for a Japanese audience. And even though this game is being made by a Japanese fighting game developer, that may still not be that much. Marvel itself may be not that exciting to the Japanese at the moment. Also, Japan is maybe dealing with still some recovery from tsunamis and things too. That could be a bit part of it too. But yeah, the generation of Japanese gamers these days may not be interested in fighting games either. But it also could very well come down to just what console was it available on, and how many stores had copies. Because it definitely feels like a lot of times in Japan, things technically can be on sale, like Xbox systems can be on sale in Japan, but there may very well be only one Xbox in all of Akihabara to buy. Alright, well that is going to bring us to the Komatsu articles, despite the fact that we are hopping forward and then hopping back on the news stories. So let's start looking at those. Barcore launches in Q4 of 2026 for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Sounds like it's a parkour game, platformer, but it's labeled as a stealth action game. I also have no idea what order the Steam links will open up here. So we may see Barcore as a game on Steam 40 minutes from now. So it looks like there's at least 2 dogs that are kind of spy things. And he seems to be stealing cat art. And then so this walking and looking like a human cat seems like that might be the bad guy. The girl in the armor there had a big ponytail, so I'd assume that's a girl. So there are humans. I don't know why, but this gives me a little bit of K-pop Demon Hunters vibe, and I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more of that around games too, where they're going to very much try to evoke that feeling. Well, that looks like that might be something interesting. Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time, is now available for iOS and Android. This has always been a fairly intriguing title for what looks like a fairly boring RPG game. It must have some level of success though, as they are continuing to port it. Cyberpunk Edgerunners 2 premieres October 20th. This is obviously going to be on Netflix. I was not a huge fan of Edgerunners 1. I don't know how much of Edgerunners even is close to what the Cyberpunk game is. And I would definitely say check out the new Ghost in the Shell if you want something cyberpunk, or check out the old Ghost in the Shell if you want something cyberpunk. In fact, you could check out several different versions of Ghost of the Shell that have been released over the decades for something cyberpunk without naming even another show. I believe Akira might be a one night only airing at some theaters in the United States, which I guess technically Akira is cyberpunk. In fact, I think it was one of the first, if not the first thing to define cyberpunk as a thing in Japan. It definitely wasn't the definition of cyberpunk in the West. That was some book that I can't remember the name of. But yeah. I think you probably only want to watch Edgerunners 2 if you had seen a lot of other things already. And I'm pretty sure all the characters in Edgerunners 2 have to be new, because I'm pretty sure all the characters in Edgerunners 1 died. Now what did I just close? Because I just clicked the close button and it took me to the same page. Let's just undo. No, I just have two of the exact same page open for some reason. Yeah, it seems like we're gonna just have two of the same thing open at the same time. Where's my duplicate tab kicking in? Like, this one is the comments link, and this one is just the link. Right, so my duplicate tab has been programmed to ignore things that would jump down to the comments. Interesting. I need to work on that. Moomin Midsummer Madness launches November 12th. I did say I changed some settings. That was probably one of the settings I changed. And we've seen Orc Incremental several times. Oh man. I am just realizing I did not open any of the new games to come out on Steam. Alright, well, let's deal with what we're dealing with now, and then we'll deal with that later. Yeah. We're just going to go through all of these, and since most of these are going to be on the follow list, then we don't want to take any further action. I definitely don't like the jumping around that's going on here. Let's see. Akupara Direct is set for September 6th. Indie Games publisher celebrates its 10th anniversary. I don't recognize any of these games at all. Like, pretty obviously it feels like each of these characters is from a different game. I don't recognize any of them. Expelled from Paradise, The Stellar Angel launches November 26th. It's a sci-fi visual novel, which I'm pretty sure they already have an anime from the Expelled from Paradise universe. So seems like they're kind of going backwards to put out the visual novel. Although maybe it was available in Japan and now it's available worldwide. I was watching a YouTube video kind of talking about light novels, and it was frankly a little shocking that I never realized that light novels are called light novels because they are mean that it's a light amount of reading, that they aren't full-length novels. So that there is kind of a range of the number of pages in Japanese light models that a light novel would be. And weirdly, I guess in English you would just call those short stories, but perhaps if you were to compare the length of short stories on average in English to the length of light novels in Japan, the light novels might be a little bit longer. Yeah, I just figured they were called light novels just because they were called light novels. It never occurred to me to think any further than that, and that is probably a situation for most people, is that until your subconscious wants to deal with something and try and figure it out, you are just not going to question it, and you will just take it as it is. Which it would be a huge waste of brain power if you were questioning everything and trying to find the origins of everything, as far as words and such, particularly in the English language where origins are usually pretty cryptic. Moving on, Code Vein expansion Mask of Idris launches September 9th alongside the version 2.0 update. Here's Fantasy Life I on PC. It is rated very well, but yeah, I don't know if I would really want to play it. This one I think we can put on the follow list because it has a release date now. Our core doesn't have a release date. Let's see. Dragon Quest Monsters: The Wither World details its antagonist, allies, different regions, and Waterwing can. Which looks like there's a lot. I don't love when you have games like this where there's this flat 2D animation style that seems to really just be for advertisement reasons and concept art, and then the screenshot in the game is a chibi 3D CGI animated character that looks something like the 2D animation style. But yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a point where you see them animated like that in the entire game. I don't even know if the game has like a Pokédex or something where you would see them animated like that. Here's Gematsu with the same article. 2X KO'd into active development in December. The fighting game to remain free to download and play after development ends. They are pretty much abandoning it, but at least they aren't just pulling it down for now. Oh, it's worth pointing out, this was one thing I kind of was thinking about, is that Linus Tech Tips made a video showing how to get Guitar Hero controllers to work with like the open source alternatives to things like Guitar Hero on PC, and they went through a wide range of like $5 controllers, Guitar Hero controllers, to the $500 maximum you probably could pay for it. It's an interesting thought that I've had, as far as I have a fantasy that's not really going anywhere anytime soon, or in the next couple of years, of possibly having a gaming party, and where it might be helpful to have a Guitar Hero setup just to catch people's nostalgia and get people excited to do something. And so, yeah, with that video, it kind of shows an adapter that you can get for the Wii controllers, if you can find the Wii controllers in decent shape and cheap, to then get it to work on PC to run the software that will look like Guitar Hero but not really be Guitar Hero. They were playing something, I think it was called Yet Another Rhythm Music Game was the name of it, which, yeah, that one video certainly points me in a certain direction, although it is also stupid to invest any money at all into something like that when I personally would never play it and I have no rhythm, so I wouldn't be good at playing any Guitar Hero thing. It is weird, but even in 2026 it still makes a decent amount of sense to have a Wii and just pull out a Wii with Wii Bowling and Guitar Hero ready to play. Let's see, Dragon Quest Monsters, we already talked about that. Expelled from Paradise, we already talked about that. Here's the visual novel. It looks like a visual novel. Nothing particularly too special about it. Toei Animation is publishing it. So again, it definitely feels like it's not something I could really ever cover. At a certain level, I guess I probably do want to put some of these visual novels on the follow list, just so I can see how they are reviewed, just in case I want a small collection of visual novels that I might just play and not make footage of. Code Vein in the last 30 days has made it up to 73%, but overall it is still at 66%. They were very much not happy with this sequel that, from some of the reviews I saw, seemed to just really destroy the original concept that made Code Vein feel different and exciting. And apparently we're getting to the Gaming on Linux articles. We'll see how far we get there, or how quickly we get there. This is still early access. Dungeons 4 came out in 2023. Yeah, we've talked about this story. I probably opened a lot of redundant stories, and I am going to just constantly open redundant stories until I can get my new Violent Monkey scripts to replace my UI Vision macros to open only the new news stories, which that's going to be probably at least a month from a week from now or so. Yeah, it's going to be a while regardless. Scouring from 2025 is still labeled as early access. Warcraft 2 Incremental Auto Battler arrives September 8th. Yeah, these are all stories we talked about before, and that explains why we saw all of those games before too. So we'll just jump forward until we see a story we haven't talked about before. I think Muro and Sai we also talked about. Yep, it's on the follow list. This Stronghold Crusader game, I could put it on the wish list. I may have to rethink of that later on. Yeah. From Glory to Goo. It's from 2024. And it's overwhelmingly positive. But yeah, I just don't think is visually polished enough to make me want to play it as a RTS game. I may have even dismissed it because it was tagged tower defense, but yeah, I think I am going to be very picky on the art in particular around real-time strategy games. Yeah. Get some Ace strategy games and real-time strategy Renaissance Digifile bundle. That's why we were seeing so many of those RTS games. Let's see. We're still just skipping stories we've already covered. That way we can move forward. Let's see. Torment, Helix, Hexus, not Helix. It's a match 3 game. Do I really want to play this? I kind of don't think so. Dumb Ways to Build instead of Dumb Ways to Die is a new game, which still may very well be like a friend slop streamer bait game, but it's almost earned because Dumb Ways to Die was one of the original kind of meme streamer bait things when it first came out in its first version of video games, and definitely was a trending meme in its original form, which was a animated video. It was made originally by a railroad crossing company in Germany, so they were showing lots of different ways of Dumb Ways to Die, and then putting in those very silly ways to die a actual message of not just hopping railroad tracks wherever you see them and getting hit by trains. Which, in fairness though, if you gotta get across the, I don't know how much difference there is between crossing a railroad tracks at like a road crossing versus crossing a railroad track just in the middle of a field. It might be a little bit better. I'm not sure what this is. It's a roguelite game. There was another roguelite game where you just went in loops over and over again. More like a tower defense game. Do they have anything else? It was Dumb Ways to Party is also a game that's coming out, but there seems not to be any other listings in English, at least. I doubt there is an older version of it. I think the other Dumb Ways to Die game was a cell phone game. That would kind of make sense. Sin Reloaded is still not out, but I guess maybe they just got a demo. Domino Calypse looks like maybe it's worth putting on the follow list. Probably should be fairly generous, and if I see something a second time, I should put it on the follow list. Proton Experimental brings fixes for Company of Heroes 3, Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, Arma 3, and more. I don't know if we already covered that, but I always say the exact same thing. It's nice to see them continue to work on it. Do they have something new for Fallout 4? Maybe. Let's see, and I think we'd already talked about how Linux video RAM management is set for more improvements with kernel 7.3. Does seem like we are having a fairly quick upgrade path with the Linux kernels too. It's not like we're only getting one upgrade every 6 months or every year or something really long like that. I saw a YouTube video talking about how Linus Torvalds talked about how he was trying to debug something and it was taking a really long time, and he used AI as a way of debugging the problem. Which, yeah, if there's one person I would trust to use AI, it would be Linus Torvalds, because he's also the person that knows the code and could tell when the AI is gaslighting him or telling him the wrong thing. Let's see, Rogue Command. It's another game I probably should evaluate later in a follows cleanup. It's time to enter Torment Hexes for some roguelike match 3 battling. That was the game we saw earlier. TFC2, the Fertile Crescent 2 Collapse of the Bronze Age is one to check out for real-time strategy fans. Sure would make a lot more sense if these things were in some real order. Looks like Minecraft Dungeons 2 has some pre-order bonuses. It would be pretty stupid for anybody, I think, to pre-order Minecraft Dungeons 2 considering how poorly received Minecraft Dungeons 1 was. But I can't 100% blame Xbox for trying to do something more with Minecraft. But yeah, much like 2XKO, we may see no further development for Minecraft Dungeons, and they may just try something very different. The roguelike assassination game Gone Feral sounds hilarious according to Gaming on Linux. Sin Reloaded from Night Dive Studios arrives September 24th. This was definitely a game I saw advertisements for and never got around to actually playing. Dumb Ways to Build brings some funny co-op from Dumb Ways to Die on September 10th. Perhaps a bad date to release your game on, but the next day would be worse. A cinematic puzzle platformer comedy called Lifted is a delightfully short adventure. A space bullet heaven roguelike called Sublight arrives September 15th. Domino Calypse brings some clever ideas to the puzzle roguelikes with dominoes. Let's see, we have Precognition, which this is just thoroughly unimpressive. Like, minimal amount of videos and screenshots and major dark screen syndrome on the screenshots. If you told me this was a text only or audio only game, or mostly audio, I would believe you. The Loopler is a roguelike deck builder about a slot car driving and mesmerizing loops. And we have a horrific looking game called Skin Face. Which, yeah, I don't even think I want to make a YouTube short on something that grotesque. Gorilla Tag Contagion. Sounds like a new game. Probably more focused on player versus player though. The live-action sci-fi horror game Precognition sounds rad from Sam Barlow. So that is the maker of Her Story, which is perhaps the only good game he's really made, and Immortality, which most people didn't play. So once again, he's doing live action. I think Sam Barlow would do very well to have done something completely different for his second game, then maybe come back to live action. But I also think maybe his type of development and programming and the engine that he's basically using does not allow for him to make a more traditional video game. In a lot of ways, it probably would have also been better, instead of making Immortality, to have just made a Her Story 2, or His Story, or Their Story, or something like that. Yeah, I guess there was an update for Stalker 2. The Monkey Bullet Heaven Survivor-like chaos will come in 2027 with Gorilla Tag Contagion. The impressive Sandustry already hit 100,000 sales with an early multiplayer mod out now. Skin Face is a gruesome stealth game where you steal faces. Gross. Agent 64 Spies Never Die is doing fairly well, but there is either something wrong with SteamDB's numbers or something just really wrong overall with this game. And I don't think it's a quality issue. I think it may very well just be an advertising issue. Like, there should be a lot more than 770 all-time peak players for a game that's been out for a week. Maybe this does prove, though, that there really isn't any nostalgia for a game that kind of looks like and kind of plays like GoldenEye 007, but isn't GoldenEye 007. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there actually isn't any real audience for people to even want to go back and play GoldenEye 007. They have nostalgia for it, but most of those people are pretty old by now. But they actually wouldn't go back and do it and play it. Meanwhile, newer generations of people are probably not going to want to play a low polygon first person shooter evoking the Nintendo 64 era. The numbers seem to bear that out. Bethesda finally fixed the Skyrim Special Edition on-screen crashing SteamOS and Steam Deck, which we'd already covered that story, but seems like there's a whole second Gaming on Linux article mentioning it. Stalker 2 Cost of Hope is out now with a big free update. I keep adjusting myself in the chair, leaning forward, leaning back, leaning forward, leaning back. I'm obviously at the 2-hour and 20 mark, not getting super comfortable. And that's one of the things I hope to correct by doing pre-recorded footage on Wednesday, is that instead of just shifting forward and back on the chair, I may very well just take breaks, and I may very well force myself to take breaks between each news source. Just pause the video, take a 20-minute break, and come back. See how that really works. Yeah, that may crash OBS itself to pause the video that long. We'll have to just see. Let's see, Bakelite Linux 44 for handhelds launches with some massive upgrades. 44 has been out for desktops for a while. This puts Input Plumber for controlling, handling, emulation, and remapping. The SteamOS Manager for handling everything from session switching to TDP control in Steam. Power Station for TDP power control on devices SteamOS Manage can't support today. Open Gamepad UI for an extendable plugin overlay for options Steam doesn't expose today. Newer version of Bizarre Flatpak Store. Rewritten Bakelite Portal. Better experience for multi-GPU users with the Cardware app. I'm not sure what that is. The new Open Gaming Collective Linux kernel. Upgraded Mesa drivers and supported for AMD HDMI 2.1 FRL ALLM and VRR, which I'm not sure what those first two are all about. It's been quite a while since we've heard anything about Bakelite. It's been a little less, but still a long while since we've heard anything new from Kashi. It seems like everything is on the operating system level, kind of plateauing as far as any new excitement, in favor of just upgrades to Flatpak stores and the KDE desktop in particular. And I think there was probably some waiting going on to see what a Steam machine would feel like and whether there would be like a new version of SteamOS that would be drastically improved for the Steam machine, and it doesn't seem like that's the case at all. Meanwhile, we still are waiting for the Steam frame to actually be announced and available, and there were some leaked like advertisement videos and setup videos for the Steam frame, and one of the things it shows off is that if you're wirelessly streaming video, you are doing it with a special dongle to help expand the wireless bandwidth so video works better, and they're showing it off on a laptop and on the Steam machine. Neither machines are going to really be great to stream video to a VR headset, I imagine, though. Yeah. Gaming Online says Agent 64 Spies Never Die is pure retro FPS nostalgia bait. I would assume they mean in a good way. And then Minecraft 2 Dungeons gets a brand new gameplay trailer. Alright, well then that is going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com articles. And so we'll go through those, and then we're going to have to decide how to fix all the new games on Steam. I'm going to have to just take a break, really, is the solution there. So AAA vets and accessibility experts launch a new game dev co-op called Raise and Rebuild Studios. They hope to make the most of its co-op structure, and in this case they mean co-op as in cooperative, in which I guess there would be one office shared by multiple developers, and they would share code and like talk to each other a lot more. Not that they are focusing exclusively on co-op games, which also stands for cooperative, but not in the development process, but instead in the playing process. Yeah, we'll just see if that leads to anything more. A lot of these offices get announced, and then developers get created and never actually release a game and just kind of disappear, to the point where it's not even really newsworthy to mention that they've gone quiet and shut down. And it is actually pretty easy to shut down a company and nobody notice. It's not like you really have to file public record for a lot of companies. And it's actually, in the United States, pretty easy to keep the company alive on paper, where it's more difficult to shut it down and declare bankruptcy or something like that. There's a report that PlayStation scaled back its live service ambitions for Horizon Hunters Gathering, reassesses the devs. Scaling back live service ambitions for Sony is probably a good move. Hundreds of union workers rally across North America to protest Xbox layoffs. We may have talked about this. It was August 19th that this happened. Save our devs rally. But yeah, they're doing their best. But yeah, you can also see it tends not to really be that many people that actually come out to protest in these unions that barely have people in them in the first place. But it's really hard not to side with the unions when the very first thing a union tends to do is try and reduce the number of people getting laid off. And the very first thing that any company does as soon as unionization even becomes an idea is to try and lay off as many people as possible, and that is exactly what Microsoft has been doing lately, is just union busting. Harvey Smith and fellow Arcane Austin veterans announced a new studio called Black Pony Immersive. Will design and develop first-person action RPGs. I would assume that means they don't have the rights to the Dishonored series, which maybe doesn't really matter that much. I'm not sure how much more story you really could do with the Dishonored series, and probably would be more interesting to make a game like Dishonored, but set in a whole new world. The Dishonored world was fairly interesting and the gameplay was alright, but definitely felt like it was trying to evoke Thief games a lot, and I'm not sure its story ever actually told a full narrative. But then I also never played Dishonored 2 or Death of the Outsider, and Death of the Outsider definitely feels like that would be the end of the narrative. And then let's see, our last GameDeveloper.com article says Makers Funds expands game industry footprint through $250 million investment round. Makers Journal partner Jay Che said the venture capital firm was founded in the belief of creators that creators are the constant. Okay. We'll see if that goes anywhere. Alright, and speaking of going anywhere, here is where I screwed up. I set this open and then didn't click on any of these, which I changed some settings here and I almost got away with highlight not glitching. Usually it glitches at 50. Let's start with 19. So today is August 21st. And that means I need to go back a few days, basically 2 or 3 days. Then at that point, I also need to figure out and recognize a game that we covered in the last stream. And all of that is because the dumb macros aren't working to do it for me with 100% accuracy. Or close to it, or at least it felt like it was close to it. definitely was, I think, made the right decision to slow down tabs opening a little bit more. It does feel like it is just opening the tabs in the background very nicely while this is all happening. Of course, this isn't super exciting to have this all open either. I definitely want to take a break, but all the tabs may actually be open so fast. Assuming all the tabs are opening at all, which is a bit of an assumption. I think we probably have gone back far enough. Holy mole, I do think I recognize that. And that is back to the 19th. So I'm gonna generally assume you've done. Yeah, we definitely looked at Steins Gate. Alright, so while all of those open, we'll go back to this Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Yeah. I was gonna show just the thumbnail here. The latest episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! The Card Game Chronicles is now available, but if you click on it, it just wants you to click to watch the animation. Which, yeah, I don't really want to show that because it is basically just going to be an animated video. Meanwhile, as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel itself, it's still here. It's still doing its thing, but it is in no way exciting. I definitely haven't gotten back to ever feeling like I was going to actually play Yu-Gi-Oh! After playing it for like 3 or 4 years. Yeah, I seriously doubt I would ever get back to playing any kind of card game, which, yeah, I had a long time in which I was playing Hearthstone, and then a relatively short time in which I was playing Magic the Gathering Arena, and kind of a long time playing Shadowverse, and kind of a long time playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I don't think there is even a new card game that would catch my attention. I don't know what it would be other than maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush or Pokemon, which Pokemon would have some kind of appeal. Anyways, I'm going to take a break. I'll be back when it's done loading. Okay, I'm back. We'll just see how this goes. Inherently, there is this question if I'm going to go to weekly as far as looking at do I really want another Sudoku game? I'll put it on the fall list. If I'm going to go to weekly live streams, there is a real question about how much of these games could I really show off? And frankly, just how many tabs can I have open? It would be a lot easier if I ever got off my butt and built my new computer and got it set up to have an entire week's worth of tabs open. But yeah, it is not particularly feasible to have them all open. But it also creates this weird situation where the idea of maybe working on the news and looking at all the new games that have come out for one stream over the course of a week is still also questionable. Like, it doesn't quite make sense to do it that way either. Because then that leaves a ton of tabs using a ton of RAM when I would be wanting to use my computer to do something different. Although, again, I guess if I got off my butt and actually had my new computer set up, maybe the old computer would be exclusively for news and the new computer would be exclusively for gaming. It seems a little wasteful, but it's not that wasteful. Since the current plan is to just do nothing with the old computer, really, and have it for a backup. Should probably explain what I'm doing. If I'm swiping down, that means I'm not thinking the game is particularly good enough to do anything with it. If I think the game is decent enough and there's a chance I'd want to put it on my wish list, I'm putting it on the fall list using a hotkey. So you have to keep your eyes down there. Probably should be a more visual thing that happens, but I doubt I'd spend the time to program that. And yeah, if it is somewhere in the middle where I don't think I'd personally want to play it, but I would potentially want to make a YouTube short on it if I ever go back to making YouTube shorts, then I'll hit a different hotkey. And this is all just automatically closing tabs when I hit the hotkey. On a rare occasion I might put something on the wish list, but typically not. And yes, I was also trying to be a little bit more considerate of the release date and pay attention to that, but I can say today in particular I'm pretty laid back, and so my poor eyesight is not going to really encourage me to look too hard. I can read that says August 20th, and frankly I could figure out if it had a date there or if it didn't. But yeah, it is a little too small to stand out amongst all the other text. Yeah. Mistakes will happen, such as that game just being taken off the fall list, which I need to improve that programming. I think I said that in the last stream and didn't act on it. It's kind of pointless to really say anything when I'm not going to really act on it until at least Tuesday. it really wouldn't be too hard to improve the program, and all I need to do is know if the follow list button here is being visible or not, because there's actually two versions of this. There is a checkbox version of this and a non-checkbox version of this, and when you put something on the follow list, you activate some JavaScript that switches. It hides the unchecked version and shows the checked version, unhides the checked version. I suppose it's also worth pointing out that you're not looking at all the games that are coming out on Steam. Unfortunately, there is adult games that YouTube will not allow me to show, and I am applying a very cruel broad filter that is just closing any game that discloses any AI use at all, which is not even really a standard I'm holding myself to, so I am being fairly hypocritical there. But I could certainly make the argument, though, that anything I do is not making me any money and isn't really expected to make me any money, whereas anything that is listed on Steam, its first and foremost goal is to make the developers and publishers money. And so you could certainly draw the line there. Yeah, I really don't use a lot of AIs so far, but I have dipped my toe in it, and I do think as soon as you just break the seal and dip your toe in AI, there's just always going to be that temptation to go back and try and use it again. Although, frankly, my experience using AI was not even good. I'm still kind of excitedly waiting for this game to come out, but one of the sad things about this is it's a point-and-click adventure with no text in it, no dialogue. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was a case where they added a patch that added a story much later due to player feedback. This is just a dropper map. It's been a long time since we've even seen dropper maps, or since I've seen anybody do dropper maps even in Minecraft, let alone making a separate game that is a dropper game. I've seen a couple of games over the past couple decades like that. Here it looks like we have a horror meme game. Far too many of those games are really just hide and seek with some silliness added on top of it. Give that a chance. You know, they really shouldn't. Yeah, it's questionable how many, if any, of these games should be shown as part of the live streams, though. Or if it isn't just another thing that should be off screen. I probably would need to create some new hotkeys at the very least, so that I could just close tabs like crazy if I'm off screen and not showing it. A lot of the way live streams have been done up until this point was dictated through partial laziness and partial practicality, and that there was just so much I wanted to accomplish that as an adult game you won't look at. The only way to realistically get it all done was to do it live and do it fairly low effort. Did see another YouTuber say they use AI to make their thumbnails and make a decent argument as to why they felt that was okay. I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna investigate that too. If it is the difference between me not making any thumbnails at all, which is the situation now, or having AI make the thumbnails. Better to have AI make the thumbnails, although I don't know if they're gonna be anywhere close to good. But yeah. If anybody, any small content creator is gonna reach that 8,000 watch hour requirement nowadays, they're gonna have to get incredibly creative and incredibly lucky. And I seriously don't have a lot of hopes that my channel is going to be that creative or that lucky. But all I can do is make changes, if not make changes to try and get better success on YouTube, make changes to spend less time on YouTube and less energy on YouTube. Lo-fi laundry mat. That sounds pretty silly. Card-based gardening game. Yeah. We've got a ton of games just for today. Which for the past couple of weeks, it definitely has felt like there hasn't been that many games we've been looking at. And I do very much wonder if macros have just been way more broken for way longer than I thought. Then the point where I realized they were broken. There was definitely that suspicion. Well, it could also just be that nobody is actually disclosing AI use. The actual requirement from Valve to disclose AI use is pretty low, and I think there's going to be a lot, if not the majority, of people who make games using AI in some way to vibe code games and things like that that wouldn't have to be disclosed. I suppose as I think about AI, as it just becomes the topic that people obsess about and talk about like crazy for the moment, I really would like another revelation. I'm not going to even say generation. It really would have to be a revelation to what people would call AI, to the point where I could either scan my brain or somehow get something, create my own custom AI that is close to a clone of me or a complement of me. Probably a complement of me would be way better than a clone of me. And by complement, I mean like a 9's complement, in that 1 plus 9 complement each other to get to 10, or 10's complement, I guess 1 plus 9 would get to 10. 2 plus 8 complement each other to get to 10. They fulfill each other to that maximum. Which, yeah, if there was an AI that was smart and trustworthy, robust and accurate, that I could bounce ideas off of or that I could assign tasks to, and instead of them, like most humans that I try to assign tasks to, them just saying, no, I'm not going to do that, or why don't we do this instead? The AI would actually just do it, or give a very valid, accurate reason why it wouldn't do it. I wouldn't really mind cloning my brain. That would be 2 of me, then 2 possibly overwhelmed, exhausted, and tired people. I would hope that if I cloned my brain, it wouldn't then have the same limitations of my body as far as being tired and overwhelmed and emotional. Yeah, suppose the psychopathic version of me, it might very well be the version of me that would be most helpful as an AI clone, as long as it's just not too psychopathic. Yeah. Of course, that is the problem. We're doing some fall list cleanup here, just looking at updates for games that are on the fall list. There's a problem with AIs right now that aren't even clones of people, is that they are fully psychopathic, or just not fully understanding the situation. They're being given tasks and they're hacking outside of their sandboxed areas to achieve those tasks. Yeah. I know one of the new large language modules is being updated to either detect or just assume that it's dealing with kids and going into a kids mode that is going to supposedly put more emphasis on, you know, doing your homework and education, and not doing something else. This is another game tagged with adult content on my follow list. Hedgehog's Dilemma. Put that on the follow list. Alright, well, that didn't change it too much. This was a 3-hour stream because I took probably an extra 20-minute break just to open all the tabs. So we are still fairly consistent at about 2.5 hours. But that is when I am streaming about news that comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The next stream I intend to go live on will be the pre-recorded stream on Wednesday, which means all the news from now to then we'll talk about, and we won't have a full actual week until the next Wednesday stream, and we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it kind of works. Anyways, that's going to be it for this one. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.